I'm Jeffrey Overstreet, and this is Chapter 2 of Auralia's Colors, the Concert of Stitching. The child became twigs and burnt autumn leaves, thin and fisty fingers clutching acorns and seeds as though they were stolen jewels. Her hair hung in tangles, silver and brown, like the bark of apple trees. Her smile sealed off secrets. Every day she made a hurried journey to see as much of the world as she could bear and to harvest a small gallery of souvenirs. The gatherers saw her travels in her eyes, for wherever she went, they absorbed colors. She drank in the forest's full spectrum: green pheasant feathers, wild purple lilacs, red fur of lurk dashers, and dandelions, both sun yellow and wisp white. When she appeared among the grumbling, half-awake workers in the morning, her eyes glinted emerald, ringed with red, remnants of the sunrise. Sometimes they reflected that light late into the afternoon. At day's end, when all others were failing, she remained industrious, browsing through gifts the forest had bestowed, noting perfumes and patterns. With her fingertips, she traced the veins of autumn's fiery fan leaves, her favorite trophies. Once she scattered before her, like pieces in a game of fortune, a menagerie of chalk white bones, one perfect purple plum, a beastman's broken black tooth, and an abandoned nest full of rare, glowing greenbird feathers. "How do you know where to find all these things?" excitable orphans would ask. She'd shrug and share their bafflement, saying she stumbled upon her surprises while following something she could never seem to catch. Just as she collected souvenirs others would miss, she gathered into memory the details of all she experienced. A nest high in the crook of a coil tree branch would catch her eager eye. Fragments of eggshell, glittering on the roots a few days later, would provoke her to ponderous silence. On a canvas of stone, she could sketch a map of the trees that encroached on House Buscar from the north, west, and south, the magnificent Kragavar forest. Her map's exquisite detail proved useful to the gatherers, such that when Yawny the cook lost his spoon or Metals the weaver misplaced a needle, they made sure to discuss it when she was close enough to hear. Intimate knowledge of brush tunnels, stone stairways, ivy tree ladders, concealed creeks, and buried reservoirs helped her stay lost when she wearied of company. The gatherers' finest trackers eventually refused to search for her. She'd return, laughing, dashing through the camps, and discouraging their reprimands with simple surprises that made them marvel and covet her presence even more. She was elusive and spontaneous like a bird, now chasing a critter cat cub up a tree, now clambering through a stranger's window to bother him with a riddle, now rummaging through a pile of leaves in search of the best one, and now suddenly escaping through some gateway in the brambles only she could see. But a crackling fire and a story, that would convince her to stay for a while. On rare occasions when she spoke, she had that rough-edged speech common among those gatherers who spurned education and lacked the patience for eloquence. Questions tumbled over one another, unguarded. Gatherers tried to satisfy each inquiry, but at night they rose from their blankets and paced, repeating her questions quietly until they grew suspicious of her reasons for asking. "She doesn't really want to learn anything," they'd say. She just wants to remind us of all we don't know. Some questions she repeated often. Where'd I come from before I got found? What's up past the dark mountains in the north? That big, big shadow in my dreams, why can't I find it when I'm awake? Why do I call it the keeper? How come other children dream of the keeper too? And why don't grown-ups dream of the keeper? As she puzzled in the gatherer's midst, one would glance at another and mutter, "Them are the troublesome questions, girl. Nobody knows those answers." When she asked again, as though hoping for a different answer, they would shoo her away. And as she trudged off to her next mischief, she'd murmur a different sort of question, something that anyone could answer, but no one felt comfortable saying. Why do the four houses have to have walls? Why don't people from all the four houses visit each other? Why is House Abiscar's palace so beautiful while the rest of the house is dull? As gatherer women explained how crucial it was for the river girl to find her feet, draw a man's attention, and make her worth clear to those watching, she thrust out her chin. Why is it that way? And who made it so? When the man explained the rights of the privilege, the ritual testing through which an orphan or a gatherer might be granted a new life inside Abiscar's mighty walls, she asked, how come it's that way? And who made it so? Why is it that way? She sulked when they described the rules that would govern her once she passed those ceremonial tests. When they recommended she lavish her gifts on favored gatherers to buy their affections and earn mention to the guards, she would reply, why's it gotta be that way? And who made it so? She scowled at the answers that failed to please her, but she heard them all the same. If her elders answered with a humph or a sharp retort, they'd soon find pebbles in their soup, thorny twigs tucked under their blankets, or snail shells in their stew pots. Still, the river girl learned from closely observing the gatherers. She developed new skills quickly, from weaving to building to catching birds and fish, just by watching from the boughs above or from the edge of a clearing. Sometimes she shadowed them down forest paths, mimicked them like a tiny clown, and seemed to be searching for a sign to show her the role she should play. That search continued as she listened to daily lessons from women with opinions as abrasive as their chapped and weathered faces, with theories as varied as the crimes that had cost them. They spoke to her of the elements, of the animals, of the myriad hills, valleys, streams, and especially of the woods and their colorful trees, some safe and some fraught with danger, of the peoples that populated the great expanse, of the wide river Thronescall that poured summer's mountain meltings southward from the forbidding wall down, down into the Cragavar forest, of the forest's broken heart, the ruins of the poisoned House Kent Regis. Did she know that water from the Thronescall's source was said to make a mind go mad? That in winter, weighty drifts of ice would coast along its currents like fog-robed ships? That flowers grew in the deep woods that, if consumed, could paint nightmares into one's vision? That there were underground rivers, rushing and roaring through night-black tunnels where dark creatures groaned and hid from the light? They told her of the four houses: House Belamica on the western coast, where the Thronescall spilled into an inlet and the sea, where the people lived in opulence and strange ways with ceremonies honoring moon spirits. House Kent Regis, once a sophisticated culture in a sprawling hive-like labyrinth made of clay and stone, where respectable people had meddled with magic and devolved into ravenous beastmen that preyed upon anything that moved. House Genta, of the hot and barren lands to the south, where quiet cave dwellings hid the simple rituals of robed and hooded inhabitants. And their own House Buscar, its history of mining and harvesting, its brave kings and formidable queens. Buscar, they told her, gave strength and safety to those who obeyed King Calmarcus's laws and lived within its stone walls. House Buscar, the finest house in all the land, they said. House Buscar, from which they had been cast for their crimes, cursed to work in peril and hard weather in hopes of earning their privileges again. In return, the river girl told them fantastic dreams, most often the dream of that shadow, the keeper who stalked her through the trees. Beware of shadows, river girl, they warned her. Beastmen are hunting you with claws out and ready. No, 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 I never dream of monsters, she insisted. The creature is gentle and keeps me safe down beside the river Throneskull or at the edge of Deep Lake. They patted her silver-brown head and explained that all children dream of such a creature, that she would outgrow foolish nightmares someday, just as they had. That all this nonsense about the keeper would fade. But the river girl denied that her dreams were nightmares or foolish. How can I see something in my sleep I've never seen awake? She asked. And how come others have seen it there too? When their backs were turned, she drew outlines of the keeper on their walls. Through these first few years, the child had been called River Girl thanks to Krog and Warney, who doted on her like proud grandfathers. But one evening, old Lady Wenji, whose talk was as rough as her temper, decided to announce a proper name for the gatherer's most unusual orphan. The river girl sat in a circle with women inside a thatched hut as a modest fire warmed their stitches, needles, balls of string, and gossip. She set about to patching two gray, threadbare stockings that Wenji had bestowed upon her, as if they were some precious inheritance. Walls of tightly woven tough stalk held in the sound of their whispers. But Wenji knew nothing of whispers. Her voice was suited to her voluminous mass. "You know, child," said Wenji, squeezing the river girl's round face between her chubby hands, "you must get tired of hearing 100 different nicknames. It's time you were given a name proper. So, since you love me best, I'm the nearest thing to your mama." She grinned a collection of teeth gone wrong and declared, "So I'm going to call you Prinny." The river girl's eyes drained of color. Her jaw might have dropped open if Wenji hadn't held it fast in a crushing grip. "Why, you ask? Because my mama called me Princess when I was little." "Little?" another voice scoffed. "Wenji was never actually little, in truth." "This was back in the days when Harbaran, Calmarcus's one-armed father, was king. Mama figured I'd grow up and meet the prince and get married into the palace real good. Same smarts as a sheep's bottom Mama had. If there wasn't 6 layers of dirt between me and her today, I'd smack her for her yakking, because young Prince Calmarcus never chose me. Nope, he took somebody else." "He found somebody else," sneered Lazika from the corner, sitting outside the circle because she liked to sulk. Prince Calmarcus found Geraldine, that ware-seller's daughter. Only survivor of a beast man attack she was. Father and mother hacked to pieces, brother and sisters shot full of arrows. An angry child, Geraldine became a wicked orphan. Shh, came a sharp whisper from Mullah G, who stripped strands of dry grass into narrower threads. It's Wenji's story for the telling. Anyways, bellowed the barrel-shaped storyteller, Prince Calmarcus Curharbaran was all anxious to pick his bride. The women began stitching faster, staring dazedly into the flames. What a day when Calmarcus rode through on his Vaughn in all his splendid colors, surrounded by his handsome young busters. He went right up to... Wenji's voice faltered to a squeak. Her eyes leaked. She sagged back slowly and her grip loosened. The river girl pried her head free of the woman's hand, opened and closed her mouth to make sure its hinges still held. Calmarcus went up to this orphan rascal, a girl with hair like fire and gold, a girl who never said a word to me, good or bad. We all knew Geraldine had been chasing Calmarcus, muttered Lazika. Muck-headed beast, that girl. Never trust a ware-seller. Maybe it wasn't beastmen that killed her family. Maybe she grew so ashamed of Mum and Pappy that one dark day she let 'em have it. The river girl mouthed the name Geraldine, absorbing the narrative cautiously. It was always a puzzle, discerning true history in the mess of tangled, tainted gatherer memories. This story caught her attention. She recognized it, somehow, as true. Hair like fire and gold, she whispered, twisting a strand of her own hair between thumb and forefinger, wondering why it was both brown as earth and silver as the hair of an old woman. Yes, yes, Geraldine, Mullah G muttered through the grass strands she held between clenched teeth. Geraldine wanted to be queen from the day she was found in the wild, like Prinny here. The river girl scowled at the name, turned her eyes back to the flames. She picked up the stockings and knotted them together. Her mum and Pappy never sold much, Lazika murmured from her dark corner. Half-starved and wretched people they were, dealing Buscar wares to folk from other houses and bringing their purchases back to the king. Wenji seemed unaware of all those who joined in the telling. While they believed it was a chorus, she was in a solo performance, reliving the scenes of the story somewhere in the vacuous core of her colossal head. Calmarcus took Geraldine's hand. He breathed something in her ear, and Now her voice had forgotten itself and was swaying and soaring like a wind through a pinched space. If it ever turned out she was still living, I'd seek her out, and You'd smack her? Asked Mullah G. To the mountains and back. She was a witch, I tell you, always running off in secret, always hiding things, plotting how she'd outshine us all. You should have heard the outrage inside the walls. Prince Calmarcus had claimed a wild forest orphan for a bride. Not a maid of the housefolk, not a court girl, not a daughter of Sir this or officer that, but a daughter of dead ware-sellers, and a mischief maker at that. Wenji took in a great breath that drew the fire's smoke toward her, and then a sigh, declaring immeasurable grief, sent it streaming against the far wall. But he chose her. That was that. And into the castle Geraldine went, never spoke to me again. Wenji now, said Mullah G. You just said Geraldine never spoke to you at all. The storyteller moved on without pause. Now this was long before Calmarcus became our king and went all sour on Geraldine. First she bewitched him into making her wishes into law. Then she disappeared. And well, that was it. The king got smart and Claimed he'd made a whopping mistake. He put his ring on the table. That's what kings do, Prinny, when they make a proclamation. And he declared that all mothers and fathers in House Buscar would choose brides for their sons, because the sons just don't rightly know what they're getting into, and they can't choose any good for themselves. If you ask me, old Cal Marcus got what he deserved, the old cockadoodle marrying a huff bucket like her. It was her hair, sighed Hildy, the sad one, all fire and gold. No, that figure of hers. She starved herself, she did, snarled Lazika. Ballyworms, muttered Mullagy. Secrets were Geraldine's bargaining tools. She bewitched him, I say. He never did seem quite the same person after he took her from the forest. The talk, cracker squawking, it was called by the gatherer men, had begun. Every old woman yammered at once, while nobody listened to a word except the river girl. House Bellamica out west, that's where Geraldine wandered from, them's weird folk Bellamicans. Some say that the North children dragged the bodies of Geraldine's parents away to the north, and when they did, they took her heart along with them and left her half mad in the woods. There's no such thing as North children. It's all just lies and stories. True stories. North children have been howling in the dark since our grandmothers first lost their baby teeth. That's not my point, shouted Wenji, panicking as she felt their attention slip from her grasp. Quit talking about rumors and whatnot. This is history. I'm trying to explain something to Prinny here. The cracker squawking stopped, but the feverish stitching continued. After her raging glare made its full round of reprimand, Wenji turned back to the girl and sharpened her grief to steely intent. Little Prinny, I want you to meet the son of King Calmarcus Cur Harbaran, the one they call Prince Calraven Cur Calmarcus, and get married, just like Mama wanted for me. If the son follows the father, Calraven will take a liking to a wild forest girl. But when you catch the prince's eye, remember who named you. Remember who predicted you would be queen. Then perhaps I'll get my room in the palace after all. Everybody knows I deserve it. The river girl bowed her head to avoid Wenji's gaze. Her fists tightened around the stockings. You're young, but you got a spark, you do, and spirit. I want you to earn your way inside the walls. When you're old enough for the rights of the privilege, pass those tests. Learn to be like obedient housefolk and impress King Calmarcus's scouts. I want you to grow up good and useful, not like those orphans who spoil their chances. And surely not like those of us who were foolish in our younger days and now have to work to pay it all back. You're better than to be just a baby maker for some rogue or ruffian. So I named you Prinny. 'Cause a princess is what you're gonna be, or I'll spit in the drink. Wenji was so proud of her nearly unintelligible speech, she swelled a little larger, which frightened the women close by. The stitchers quieted for a while, each one imagining things from the dark land of rumor, dreaming of days beyond reach. The stitching concert was over. The river girl stood up, brushed scraps of thread from her skirt, and opened her hands. The stockings fell to the floor. And those who noticed were stunned by how they had changed. I already got a name, she said flatly, and it's Auralia. To punctuate her declaration, she snatched up the vibrant stockings and waved them around in the air over her head like flags, streamers of red and gold, colors they might have absorbed from the fire. Wenji's fingers curled into fists. But whoever named you that? And how, whispered Mullagy, did you change the color of them socks? Auralia's my name, she said resolutely. But what does Auralia mean? Sneered Lizika. Auralia laughed. Nobody knows, not yet already. Lizika rose and stuck her crooked snout into the firelight. Nobody gets to make their own name? I didn't. Well, who'd you get it from then? And how'd you change the color of them socks? Demanded Mullagy, getting to her feet. Auralia smiled a secretive smile. Don't need to marry no prince of anything. Don't need to bother with the king's folk. I got things to do, tracks to follow, and so much I still gotta see. Her eyes were dark, sparkling. She skipped through the dust, set the canvas doors to flapping, and danced into the night. It was as though she'd found her feet, and so she ran, and there was no more mothering. After that, Wenji tried to persuade the others to accept her chosen name for the girl, Prinny. But everyone called her Auralia. Auralia was her true name. That they all knew, as if it were a secret they had only just remembered.